I
right? Like a
don't
more modern version of Sherlock Holmes.
I don't watch television or Netflix. I don't watch anything, so I don't know. But go on.
Okay, so he is a British guy, right?
Okay.
And I think it was hilarious because he went through and he voiced over an episode of Planet Earth, right?
I don't
He
know
was
what
talking
that
about penguins,
is.
and he was like, "The penguins, the penguins."
I watched some, maybe part of it. Yeah, it was funny.
Yeah, he went on a talk show, and like they just kind of made fun of him for it. He was like, "Penning, penguins," and it was the funniest thing I'd ever seen. I laughed so hard.
Well, when I
Yeah,
saw
sorry, that's
the
completely off topic. I just thought it
no,
was funny.
when I saw the guy with in the Beningin, Jesus, I know it's deathly funny. Okay, so I'm gonna share the YouTube stream with you so you can have it, so you can study it. And I'll take the room here on Discord and I'll share it with the audience on YouTube so they can join us from YouTube. Because sometimes we get people like YouTube recommends my live stream and people join the live stream and then they see the link and then they join us on Discord. And last time,
Listen to it live.
yeah, they
Yeah,
join us and then they
makes
come
sense.
back. Yeah, it's good. Anyway,
But
okay.
my only requirement for any time a stream is done is no part cut out. I've had people do that before.
Yeah, I don't edit. I I don't touch it. What you see is what you get. You can watch. You can.
Cool.
I don't know if you can mirror it. You can mirror it as soon as we're finished. I give you permission to mirror it, so it's fine with me to.
Yeah, I don't actually have a YouTube channel of my own, so really no point for it to be done on my side.
Okay.
I thought about starting up one, but
Yeah, you should. It's great. I mean, it's it's like something you invest in and it grows theoretically. And in the beginning it's supposed to grow very slowly unless like you're I don't
I'm sorry. That was such been in the beginning. In the beginning.
in the beningin in the beningin in
Yes.
the beningin. Anyway,
Got
okay,
to make
let's
sure we have proper pronunciation.
yeah, so let's begin the debate. So what is your proposition? Would you like to make a proposition?
My proposition is that as it stands, evolution is the best explanation for how life came about, excluding abiogenesis. I'm not talking about abiogenesis. I'm talking strictly of how new species come forth and all that.
Wait a
Put
minute.
it simply.
Wait a minute. You're saying so so abiogenesis was not. First of all, when you say evolution, I'm assuming Darwinistic evolution, right?
To an extent, but it's not regarded as Darwinistic evolution unless you live in somewhere like the UK, where in which they do differentiate that from Lamarckian evolution, which was a completely different set. But again, we use more, like for instance, the natural selection bit has been removed because we know now that that is not the only way you can have adaptations and things like that occur through genetic mutation through population genetics. We know there's a myriad of other ways.
Wait, there's other ways to have evolution besides Darwinistic?
Well, so basically think of it like this, right? Darwin first proposed it through natural selection, right?
Right.
He didn't have knowledge on the time of what we do now with embryology, although there was a select few papers on it that weren't highly regarded at the time. But our methods we have shown through studying it through embryology, the study of genes and things like that. So while Darwin didn't know about these things, he proposed natural selection. Over time, we found that there was more than one method other than just strictly natural selection.
So what other method is there besides natural selection?
Well, natural selection and the basic of it is you have gene mutation happens. If it is beneficial, it's going to help it survive in the world. While if it is not beneficial, it's most likely not going to be able to reproduce, right? Or essentially, it's going to get eaten by a predator more likely than not. While with these other methods, granted those are not my primary point of study, it has opened up our eyes to the fact that there are things called basically kind of benign mutations that don't actually do anything when they first start out and grow into something
Can
that
you
aren't
give
affected in the same way that they are in natural selection.
can you give me an example? Because I'm not sure I understand. I know Darwinistic natural selection. I don't know of any other mechanism by which you get evolution. So can you
Well,
give me an
take for
example?
instance this an example of what would be considered a benign trait that an animal can have is look at humans. If you actually, you feel, if you would actually, press your hand up against like, your buttock, you'll feel a little bone that comes out, right? That bone is completely useless to us. That is actually a remnant of another mutation. We can point out, let's see, in whales, they still have the little feet.
Wait,
In
the
other animals, it can be.
wait, the tailbone?
Mhm. Yes, you could actually. So if you feel,
But the tail
and now I'm not talking about like the entire hip, right? I'm not
wait,
talking about the entire hip. It
wait,
is a
wait,
specific bone that comes down as a pointer.
wait, the tail. Are you referring to the tailbone?
Kinda, but it's not the entirety. I'm not talking about the entire bone, right? The tailbone most of the time refers to not just that, but a lot of your hip.
But I
Without the
no, but
tail, if you were to take off that little bitty pointer,
wait,
it
wait.
wouldn't do anything.
I just want to make sure I'm following you. So if you're referring to the tailbone, then the tailbone is a Darwinistic adaptation that it's we lost the tail and that's like the leftover. So sooner or later we're gonna.
Well, I'm talking about. Well, my example was is something that can sit there and doesn't actually do anything, right?
But
So
it's
while
not.
yes, it is a remnant,
It's in the process of
it
this.
doesn't actually.
It's being phased out, as they say.
To an extent, yes. But
So
I'm just pointing out like something that we have currently, because it's easier to point out something we have currently than something on a very specific fossil millions of years ago. So when I do these examples, I prefer to use the human body, as most people will know what I'm talking about, versus an Arthropithecus fossil that existed years and years ago that most people don't even know exist, right? So the tailbone is not necessarily, it's just a beginning example of how something can be there, but not be a strictly advantageous or disadvantageous remnant. For instance, many mutations happen like this. You have mutation that exists, right? So let's say the tail, right? The tail could be lost or it could be used for something entirely different. This is how we get multiple different mutations that happen. For instance, the fin in the earliest fish that lived in the swamp areas of the world. So you'd have a swamp, and the swamp, I'm sure as you know, their water level goes up and it goes down. Some areas of the swamp dry up while others rise up. Well, fish, in order to survive, a lot of times would have to make it between these little marshes. Now they had fins. So what they did was is these fins they would shoot up onto the land and they would use the fins to kind of push themselves along, right?
yeah.
Well, obviously that would be the first example of them using something that the fins weren't meant to push them along dry land. It's meant more or less to help them steer through the water.
Right.
Because mind you, the fish at the time they didn't use their front fins to paddle.
Yeah, so you can see how the fins became the four legs, the 4 feet, whatever, four hands.
Yeah. So essentially, it's just
Yeah, but
a way
but
where
these
they
are
use a.
right, but these are all examples of Darwinistic evolution and Darwinistic adaptations.
This is still within the specs. All of this is still within the specs of Darwinian evolution. I'm just pointing out how we have found that it's not just mutations that are
Let me
advantageous.
ask you this.
In fact, a lot of these.
Let me ask you, do you believe in God?
No.
Okay, so the first life that formed on Earth, what was it? How did life start?
Well, that would be abiogenesis, which is still a hypothesis,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So the basics of it is there are several competing models that actually could, a lot of them could be true at once.
Okay.
Mostly that we know through chemical reactions that different basic forms can accomplish, such as RNA. RNA turns into DNA. All that we know, RNA can be created from a small time chemical reaction that would have been possible back then.
So
Then you have DNA that is created afterwards. RNA creates
so
DNA.
so RNA formed on its own spontaneously.
Yes, that is what we have come to believe, but granted, it is still, as I said, a hypothesis. While we have a very good understanding of it, it is still there are still certain things that we are missing and looking for.
Wait a minute. So you think that RNA came spontaneously formed, and this RNA? Okay, so
As far as it goes, but like I said, I'm not going to speak on abiogenesis as it is not my strong suit. I'm not a biologist.
okay, but
But
like,
if your proposition is even if we didn't know where the beginning of life, the origin of life started, it still does not substitute the explanation for a God. That's
no,
God of
no,
the gap
no,
saying because science
no,
doesn't know, therefore God.
no. The question is, my question is, so like as far as I'm concerned, my intuition is that there was not enough time for life to evolve, for the first cell to evolve, given the timeline of Earth. We know Earth cooled down enough to support life, and I think within a very short time we already have the first fossil fuels of single cells.
No.
No? So what's the timeline?
So you have okay. So first off, we don't know when the first single-celled organisms came to life. Right. That's a
No,
big distinction here.
what's the
There are things
what's the
called the Precambrian explosion.
no, no, no. What's the earliest fossils, living fossils that we have? Fossils of life forms that we have. What's the oldest? Li-
It would I would say either just before or right around the Precambrian explosion,
What do you mean?
as far as like the massive amount.
Cambrian explosion is not too long ago. That's like I'm. That's already
No,
The Cambrian explosion is multicellular. I'm talking about the first
yeah.
single. What do you mean? I'm looking. I'm looking.
Again, we don't. As far as it goes, off the top of my head, I do not know. So the thing is, there is while I would say that where we saw the majority of fossils come into play, it would be the Precambrian explosion, because that is a point where in which we found very little fossilized evidence of life to a crap ton all at once. Reason being is we were going from what would be a much harder ability to fossilize to a much easier. So a multicellular organism is much more
Look,
likely and much
hold
easier
on.
to
Wait,
fossilize
one
than a
second.
single cellular.
One second. Look, I just looked up. Cambrian explosion is an interval of time
Mhm.
approximately 538.8 million years ago. That's like nothing. Like the Earth is like I don't know, about 4 billion years old, and this is just from half a billion years ago. So life started about 4 billion years ago. So Cambrian explosion is very late. That's like basically right before dinosaurs showed up and just before life showed up. Multicellular exploded. But I'm looking for the first cell. So life on Earth started with
Okay, so the first single-celled eukaryote that was ever found was about 1.65 billion years ago. That's where it's been dated, right?
no,
If that's what you're asking for. No,
no.
seriously, look it up.
Okay, let's
Uh,
first
it wasn't until 1.65 billion years ago that the first single-celled eukaryotes, the group that includes all plant and animal life on Earth, showed up in the fossil record
first
sediment from North China.
life on Earth. So the first, where's Wikipedia? Earliest. Let's take it.
And that's But
So
mind
the
you, when you go
earliest,
from cellular
let me just
to
read it 1 second. The earliest known life forms on Earth may be as old as 4.1 billion years old, according to biologically fractioned graphite inside a single zircon grain in the Jack Hills range of Australia. The earliest evidence of life found in a stratigraphic unit, not just a single mineral grain, is the 3.7 GA, I guess billion year old meta sedimentary rocks containing whatever. So that's the earliest known life form on Earth, maybe as old as 4.1 billion. So that's very old.
yeah, the earliest fossilized, right? Like that's the key point here is fossilization is a very hard thing to occur.
I'm just saying,
In fact, it's amazing that we found
when
this
did
many fossils
life,
that we have.
I'm saying, when did life begin on Earth? It looks like if we
We don't
found,
entirely know.
no, but it
We don't
sounds
have an
like,
exact date for
what do you mean? It sounds like it's four. Life on Earth is 4.1 billion years old. That's how this article
the earliest
begins.
prospect for when life could have started and could have begun was a little while after the Earth cooled down and was formed. However, we do not have an exact pinpoint on when the first what would be considered life arose. That would be something that again would be more better answered by abiogenesis.
It
So,
goes on. Uh, Let me just copy a little bit more so we can read it. So the earliest evidence of okay,
another thing to take consideration is what would be considered life. That's another thing. Is some people, some biologists consider it to be a single cellular organism. Others consider it to be simple RNA and DNA. It's still something that is protested as what could be the smallest form of life available. So that is something else to take into account. But I fail to see what that has to do with evolution as a whole, because abiogenesis is completely separate from
no,
evolution.
what I'm saying is life on Earth didn't have a chance to form. It sounds like from the evidence that life came to Earth. It sounds like life is abundant in the vacuum of space. And as soon as the Earth cooled down, life settled on the planet and continued.
And what evidence do you have for this conclusion?
It's just my intuition that so I was
Well,
about
we can
to
show
read.
that intuition doesn't work well.
Wait, 1 second.
Intuition is one of the most is extremely unreliable. There
Okay,
are many things that
wait.
could go against your intuition.
Yeah. Hold on. Let me talk a little bit. So here, I was about to read this. So the earliest evidence of life found in the stratigraphic unit, not just a single mineral grain, and blah, 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 whatever. The earliest direct known life on land may be stromatolites, which have been found in 3.48 billion year old geyserite uncovered in the desert formation of the pillow. Various micro. Anyway, my point is that it sounds like life on Earth began as soon as life on Earth could have begun. As soon as the Earth's crust cooled down just
But you,
enough to host life, life begun. And that and
yeah,
and
that is essentially abiogenesis. It's
no,
saying that
no.
during the time, no, let me finish.
Wait, I
So
was.
during the time of abiogenesis, what would have happened, the basic components of it is RNA formed DNA, which is an extremely fast procedure. It doesn't take long.
But you need
And
to
then from
create.
that, you have,
You need to create a cell. You need time to evolve a single
oh, we're getting
cell.
there.
What?
Oh, we're getting there. I said, oh, I was getting there. We've actually already created a cell in a lab, a very small version of a cell in a lab using the same methods you would go through to create RNA, DNA, and all that.
A, si-
Prokaryotes and things like that.
a single cell has. is a city. It has DNA, RNA, messenger RNA, proteins. It's able
Hmm.
to reproduce. It's such a
But
complex animal.
but can I ask you this
Hmm.
again? And like I said, I am not extremely proficient on abiogenesis. But the thing is what is your point? Even if we had no idea how life came about, that doesn't say that it was brought here or that it was then created.
I'm not saying it's been created. I don't believe in God, but it sounds like.
Yeah, but the problem is you're still inserting an answer where there is no evidence for that answer.
But okay, one second. You know the theory of spermogenesis, whatever. The star seeding theory, the theory that life came to Earth.
I don't believe that that would be constituted as a scientific theory, my friend. I think that's more or less a something a lot of people else got together and thought was a theory. To me, that'd be closer to a hypothesis, as that would be of abiogenesis in the scientific world. Because theory is a huge collection of facts that overwhelmingly support one conclusion over another, such as the theory of gravity, theory of evolution, the theory of whether it be cell theory, atomic theory, so on and so forth.
So, spermatogenesis is the process by which haploid. No, that's not it. No, nah, nah. What do you call it when the theory by which life came to Earth?
I do not know. I am not proficient in that. I haven't even heard of that. Well, I've heard of aliens depositing life or things of that nature. While I could I say I would be opposed to life forming out in space? No, not at all. In fact, that is something that some scientists have hypotheses on. For instance, we know that the basic building blocks of life do exist out in space, which would still be covered by abiogenesis, believe it or not, as that's the process in which happens to make simplest forms of life.
Okay, I got it. It's called panspermia. So panspermia is the hypothesis that life exists throughout the universe, distributed by space dust, meteoroids, asteroids, comets, and planetoids, as well as by spacecraft carrying unintended contamination by microorganisms known as directed panspermia. Anyway, so
Okay,
so
that isn't necessarily talking about the origin of life. That is talking about the myriad of ways that life can get to different places, as what you just described.
this is really weird.
It would,
This is really weird. So it sounds like this universe is teeming with not sperm, like seeds, like single celled life in space, probably frozen for millions of years. What's that noise?
you would have to. I would have to see this because, as far as I'm aware, the closest thing we have found to life in space would be the proteins and stuff that would be required to make the first cell or prokaryote. Because mind you, there are several more stages you get
But
to before you get to a cell.
but there wasn't enough time between the cooling of the Earth's crust and the formation and the first cells that we found on Earth. There was not enough time for single.
For maybe if we're talking about a single chance, but we're not. During
No,
that time, it would have been happening. No, let me finish. Is if you're talking about a single chance, right? Like we got this single set, yeah, maybe. But the fact is you would have had millions of potential chemical reactions going on at once, right? And in fact, we have shown that that is actually pretty probable. That given enough of these chances, you're eventually going to get to one that leads to the first ever RNA and then first ever DNA, because these are colliding all together, all at once, at a whole lot. So
So let's go.
yeah, it wouldn't be all that uncommon.
Okay, let's. I mean, what you need to have. I mean, the question is, why is your mic making so much noise? There's like static noise coming out of your mic. Are you aware of this?
No, I was not.
You can hear it if you go to the YouTube channel. You'll hear your. It just started now. It wasn't there before. Now it's gone.
I'm gonna DC and then reconnect and see if that fixes the issue. Okay?
You're gonna DP. You're gonna disconnect and reconnect.
DC, like disconnect.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. 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 Let's hope. Yeah, it's right now.
Did that fix the issue?
It's quiet. Yeah. Look. Look. The first cell.
But again, I would like to go back to what the topic was that we had agreed upon: evolution. Abiogenesis is nothing of evolution.
That's my claim. So my claim is that you can have evolution before you have a cell. You get as soon as you have a self-replicating molecule, you already have evolution. As soon as that happens, evolution kicks in. So I would say that
Hmm.
you
Which
were
is
having.
where, which is where chemical evolution takes part before evolution starts.
So I would,
Chemical evolution is the study of how cells form.
but I would say that before you get a cell, you had a self-replicating molecule, and the self-replicating molecule,
Hmm.
that's already. I would say that's life. Why would you say that's not
Yeah,
life?
in which we would have those. That would be. That was not saying that. Again, I was saying that it is highly contested as to how far down the term life goes. Some consider it to be round about the first thing that can reproduce. Others consider it to be RNA and DNA. It's where do we say that life officially began? Same way with evolution. Where did the first ape begin, right? Or the first human between apes? So when you look at the ape lineage and you look at the entire fossil record and the species that could join the two, it's very hard to pinpoint and go, yep, that is the first human. It's kind of the same way with abiogenesis, where in which you have a series of chemical reactions that would lead to, your first prokaryotes, eukaryotes, so on and so forth. That before that process, well, you can look at a prokaryote and go, yeah, this is life. It's hard to look and you look at the ending of it and go, well, we know that RNA isn't life, but it's hard to pinpoint where exactly it becomes quote unquote
I
life.
wouldn't say RNA is or isn't life. I would say, is RNA capable of self-replicating?
Yes,
If you had a self-replicating RNA, then you could say, fine, you can define it as life. Why not?
yes, RNA can self-replicate. It can build DNA, and we all know what DNA can do, right?
I don't need RNA.
So,
I don't need RNA to build DNA. All I need is for a molecule to self-replicate. As soon as a molecule
which we
self-replicates,
have.
Darwinism takes the laws of Darwin fire up, and you start having.
Not necessarily, no, because you got to realize there's a certain point in which RNA is still going through chemical reactions, not biological reactions. Because the first thing you need for Darwinian evolution to take into effect is genes. You need a gene for that to happen. If you don't have a gene, you don't have Darwinian evolution, which is where biological evolution comes into play, or
Wait a minute.
biochemistry.
Wait a minute. No, no, I disagree. I disagree. You can have Darwinian Darwin didn't know that we have genes, so you cannot.
But his was through the natural adaptation that were proposed. He did not know the exact means in which they were done. But again, unlike in what you would see today, the different things he was seeing, such as the growth of beaks, the changing thereof, were due to genes, not due to simple biochemistry that were happening within cells. Once you
Right,
get to a certain point within the cell, yes, you would
right.
have Darwinian evolution would take over. But
Okay,
biochemistry is a more in-depth look at it.
okay, but he didn't know, so he came up with a theory that we can employ regardless of genes and regardless of the information mechanism.
Oh,
For example, I often use Darwinian theory in order to explain the evolution of the iPhone, the evolution of modern furniture, the evolution of modern society, the evolution of modern warfare, the evolution of the wheel, the evolution of modern government, the evolution of anything can be explained perfectly with Darwinian the evolution by natural
well, see, the
selection.
the problem I have with that, right, is the fact that Darwinian evolution does go a very long way. Once you reach a point where there are no genes, there is no actual communication of data as such. Once you get to your first
But
what would be considered biological life
why do you
form, you don't have that. It's just a series of chemical reactions.
why do you care? Darwin didn't care. Darwin came up.
Because Darwin isn't the one who's currently okay. So Darwin is not the own. He's not the end all be all, right? Even past Darwin, we have made discoveries that have proven and went above, right?
Yeah,
So we added these things. So the thing is Darwin isn't the end all be all. We go by what the current science states. There are things that
but if
Darwin stated
but if fine,
that weren't entirely true.
but if the theory of evolution by Darwin's theory, if Darwin's theory, evolution by means of natural selection, if that can perfectly explain the evolution of uh, rockets, the evolution of cars, the evolution of haircuts, the evolution of of tables and chairs, the evolution
I don't
of
see
construction.
how Darwinian evolution can even remotely explain those things, right? Because Darwinian evolution is talking about life forms. A
No,
key portion of that is its ability to reproduce.
no,
Like if you
no,
read his book, it is
no. You don't. You can employ that theory on anything that somehow reproduces. If like the iPhone is reproduced. So you have generations of iPhone, you have mutations, you have the information
no,
carrier. Hmm.
no. So the mutation in and of an iPhone, right? Well, you're considering mutations, or I'm assuming, it getting a better screen, a better camera.
Not
Those aren't the
necessarily.
same as,
Not necessarily. Mutations are not
but they don't come
necessarily.
by random happen chance, right?
Not.
The point of
That's my
evolution, even
point.
Darwinian evolution, was
That's
it was random happenstance. There was
that's
no
my
end
point.
goal.
That's my point.
But
Some
we don't have that with iPhone.
Yes, you
There
do.
is an end goal
How
with
do you
iPhone.
know? You're not an engineer. You're
Because you
not.
can ask the guy who is
It
creating it.
doesn't
The
matter.
guy who's creating it is saying, I want a better camera, so we're going to focus on getting a better
But
camera.
why did he
I
say he?
want a bigger screen
Why did he say these things? Maybe it was a miscommunication.
because we
No,
can.
maybe you don't know what happened. Maybe it was a miscommunication. Maybe he misheard. He misspoke. He said this, but man, that happens all the time in the world of engineering.
You would have to say that for every single thing, right? Because the thing
No,
is
no, I don't.
there
I
are
don't.
clear goals when you're making
No,
when you're
that's
making
not true.
furniture, right? When
No,
you're making furniture, you start with the idea that I want to make a table. You don't just when you start up with that, you have your basic blueprint. You go, okay, I want to make a
yes,
table. I want it to look, somewhat
that's
like
your
this, right?
DNA. That's
That's not
correct.
how,
That's
but that's not how evolution works.
what do you mean? You're trying
You can
to.
ascribe that to DNA and it making things, but genetic mutations work like this. It is literally a mutation that is mostly random. It can harm, it can help, or
Yes,
it can just be benign,
yes.
right? But
Sometimes
that's not what you see in when you make something. When you make something such as a
don't know.
iPhone,
That's not true.
right?
Of
You're
course, you sometimes have mutations. I just explained to
when I
you.
make a table, right? Let me ask you this, right? When I make a table, I don't sit there and guess it. I measure it out. I
Yes,
make precise measurements,
that's akin to the DNA.
and I also work in sheet
Yes, that's akin to the
to
information.
DNA, yes, but not to but not to evolution. That is a
Usually,
completely different standpoint.
usually when you're
DNA acts as if it's the blueprint, right?
hold
You have the blueprint.
wait.
That's what DNA does. It is a simple blueprint.
Okay, but Darwin didn't know there was DNA. Anyway, when you make a table, really what you're doing is you are copying a table that you saw, or maybe you're putting together ideas from many tables that you saw. So you're s- but basically you're copying
But
ideas.
even then, it's not how evolution works.
No,
Evolution doesn't work as
I
we,
don't,
as the being
don't
saw
I,
another being with legs and decided to grow legs.
look. I'm not saying you're talking about how evolution works specifically on Earth, in life forms with the DNA. I'm talking about evolution, Darwin's evolution, the idea that Darwin brought into the world, which is
Even
much more.
Darwin was stating that it was by reproduction, that it was through changes in, and believe it or not, he did have a very little knowledge on genes. It wasn't something that was way off back then,
I don't, but
right? He had
my
a little bit of this knowledge.
point is, you can use Darwin the
He even knew about DNA.
hold on. You can
But my
use
point
hold on.
is
Let
if
me.
you read Darwin's book, it's not compatible with a table or with an iPhone at all.
But how could it not? Darwin didn't know about the internal mechanics of DNA, so how could it be incompatible?
Because of these reasons. He specifically stated it was by means of reproduction and through genetic diversity and things of that nature, right? So the problem of what
But
you're
he
doing
didn't know
is
what
you're
a gene. How can
removing.
you say genetic diversity? He didn't know what a gene is.
Actually, they did know that, dude. They had a very, they didn't have a as broad of an understanding as we do now, but they knew and had been theorizing about genes or hypothesizing about genes for a while now. I think it goes back to like the around the
Okay, look, when you look at the evolution of the iPhone, so you could see that from generation to generation, most of the iPhone, most of the features are maintained. They all have a screen, they all have a battery, they all have a button, they all have, an app and stuff. And sometimes they grow bigger, sometimes they grow smaller, sometimes they're thinner, sometimes it's metal, sometimes it's glass. It varies, and sometimes there's mutations that something, whatever. I don't want to even say mutations, but you can see, you can map,
but
you can map.
the clarifying difference
Yeah,
between these two is, and this is a very important distinction because when you start putting these together, it allows for people who want to try and deny evolution to start using it in a faulty way. Because I will admit, if you look at it with a blurry vision, it kind of looks like evolution, but it's not because you have a difference.
I
There's,
don't.
on
I
one side, you
don't
have
care. I don't.
someone physically implementing these features.
I don't
By
care.
like they go through and they say we want a better camera,
I
we
don't.
want a bigger screen,
But
or
that's
we
not
want
the
it to be
point.
thinner.
That's not.
Evolution does not work like that. It is
That's,
not a design prospect,
that's
and
not.
even Darwin
That's not
stated
the
that.
point. That even that's not the point. Darwin came up with a theory that is very powerful to explain.
Hypothesis.
Fine. That is very powerful to explain how life evolved on Earth. But this theory is actually even much, much more powerful than Darwin ever expected, because
Granted, his theory was how everything is
let me finish.
related,
Let me
right?
just finish. Let me
And
just
species,
let me
not
let me just
life in general.
let me just finish a sentence. So his theory is even more powerful than he anticipated, because you can employ his theory to explain the evolution of things like an iPhone, like tables, but even ideas like the evolution of democracy, the evolution of philosophy, the evolution of science, the evolution of evolution. You can,
But here's the problem, though:
yeah,
is in evolution, things can backtrack and have backtracked. For instance, it was around the dinosaur period that you had the best survivors on the planet, better than anything we have today,
okay.
right? But you will not see in the generations of the iPhone, right? You won't see one that is generally worse just pop up out of the line, right? That is worse off than the flip phone, right? The difference being is one is being controlled. One is saying, hey, we want a better camera, and then they go out and they make a better camera. The other is blind happenstance, and that is the biggest portion of this. Is when you start comparing it, is there is an actual different term for evolution that does describe the iPhone, but it's not Darwin's term. The evolution of items has existed for long before Darwin. In fact, the first time where in which the evolutionary chain was actually ever brought up, as far as I'm aware, as far as the evolution of government, societies, was in Greece. So that's not even a Darwinian term.
Wait, are you
What you're
saying?
describing would be better off to Lamarckianism evolution,
Oh
where things get better as time progresses.
no, the whole
Things get
point.
more adapted to what they're designed to do.
No, no. My point is, when you try to explain the evolution of the iPhone, so you would say that every generation, the iPhone, the next generation is a copy of the previous generation. And then you had then Google created their phone, and they just copied the iPhone, and then Galaxy, whatever, no, whatever, they copied the iPhone, and they created theirs, and
Oh,
they created.
iPhone copied Galaxy. iPhone copied Android. Android's been here long before iPhone was ever here.
My point is that, like when, when you try to explain how the iPhone evolved, you don't have a theory of how the iPhone came to be the way it is. You don't have a
Yes,
general.
I can give you the exact process.
No, you
I can
can't.
give you the exact process.
No, you can't.
Yes, I can.
No, you.
I can tell you
No,
how the man who created the iPhone
no, you can't.
said, "Hey,
Who's that man?
I want to create a
Was
phone."
who was that? That didn't happen. You don't know the history of the iPhone.
Oh, so the iPhone came by natural means? Like it just appeared on Earth one day? No, a guy created it,
No,
literally.
no, no one created the iPhone. The iPhone, you didn't study how the iPhone first appeared on Earth. It was not created.
So no one went out and built the iPhone.
No one, of course, no one person built the iPhone. That's for sure. No one person. It was, it was like the first cell. It's like, they put the.
A team of people, like let's say at best, like a team of people got together
No,
and
that did not.
artificially built
No,
the first iPhone. It did
no,
not come
that
apart naturally.
never happened. It did not happen because Steve Jobs was against the idea of the iPhone. So they had to do it underground without him knowing. It was crazy. It was not a team. No one ever thought about it. It came to be
So
basically by means of natural selection.
there was an iPhone. There was an early whatever underground breeding with each other that caused the iPhone to come into existence.
Look, I don't. My point is, no one knows. I don't think anyone knows exactly what happened. Of course, no one knows exactly what happened. Something happened, and then this, and then that. It was some natural process between people, between engineers and product designers and business managers, and it was some almost a lot. Of course, it was very chaotic and a lot of randomness, a lot of noise, a lot of wars, a lot of, and he shelved it the first time they told him about it. He shelved it immediately. He told them never to work on it again. Anyway, it was very chaotic to just say that somebody one day woke up, there was one person, and he thought up. No, that never happened. Forget it. It was just
Um,
a bunch of.
so the thing is it still did not. Is even the way you just described it is still not a natural means, right? A natural means would be it can come by naturally without human interference. An iPhone or a phone in
No,
general
no, no,
cannot
no.
come by
No,
fully naturally.
no, no. I'm not saying that humans were not involved. I'm saying that it was not an engineering process. So a lot of people, they think that the iPhone was engineered, or they think that this generation of the iPhone was engineered. That you can say just until the day you go work for Apple. And when you're on the inside and you see the mess that goes on inside an engineering company like like Apple or Google, one of those the complete mess that is the internals.
Yeah,
We only
yeah. No one's saying that it's not complicated, but that's not saying that it
no,
can come by
don't,
natural means.
no.
There's a difference.
It's not the point that it's complicated. The point is it's unknown. No one knows. You think you don't know what goes on because you're not inside. But when you go
But the
inside,
thing is if you
listen,
have the
when
parts,
you
you can
go,
fully recreate an
no,
iPhone.
no. When you go inside into Apple, you still don't know how the iPhone ends up as the iPhone. No one knows. It's too big. It's way too big of a project for anyone to know what even the iPhone is. No one knows what the iPhone is. It's way
Except for
too.
the fact that I, as someone who has personally taken apart an iPhone, been able to put it back together fairly easily, right? Even the software components of the early iPhones
What do you mean? How can you put that?
were fairly
You have
easy.
no access to the software components. What are you talking about?
Actually, you do. There is
No.
actually a way you can access all the software. So, for instance, there are many different ways you would do this. So, for instance, if I wanted to get past the lock mechanism, well, you could either brute force it, which would be you just typing in random passwords until you got it right,
No,
or
you
you can
don't.
use a
You know,
program that disables.
you have no access to the.
That's how hacking works.
No, but you have no.
Is you literally access the software.
Even if I gave you the code for the operating system, it's way too big for you to go through it and understand it. I would for
But the
all that.
problem is I do have an understanding of it to the fact that I can actually
Yes,
make entire programs
yes.
just for Apple.
Look, the
Right? This is
point.
an entire thing that
My
happens every
point.
day.
Look, my point is there's thousands of engineers working on this. Not there's no one single engineer that understands
I'm
the
not
whole.
saying there is,
So no one
right?
knows.
But what I'm saying is that
So the
many of them, it's not like they're all working blindly. They all have an idea. They come up with an idea of what
yes,
they want
yes,
done,
just like
and
the
they say,
yes,
okay,
yes,
what's the best way to do this?
just like the proteins that
Evolution
copy.
doesn't do that.
No, just like the proteins that copy the DNA, and just like the RNA, like each piece of the puzzle knows exactly what it's doing. The cell is composed of all
No.
these tiny,
In
tiny.
fact, the majority of evolution, we can show that it doesn't have any idea on what it's doing. There are many evolutionary lineages that were lost due to
I'm not even.
bad,
I'm talking. I'm
bad
talking.
things that came out, bad
I'm
outcomes.
talking right now about the mechanics of the single cell. The single cell is composed of many, many tiny molecular robots that each one of which is completely blind. It has no idea what it's doing, why it's doing. The whole cell is a clockwork of all these robots working together. They have no idea what they're doing. Each one of them, of course, is not intelligent. And of course, the whole thing is not intelligent, but it works as if.
But actually, we can show that a single cellular organism is actually fairly intelligent. They can solve complex mazes.
I
They can do
agree.
all these sorts of
I,
things.
you don't.
So
I
it
agree.
shows intellect.
Yes, I agree. But, but
But the problem
my
with what you're stating
my
is you're
no, my point is the way the cell works is very similar to the way every company in the world works. Every one of the engineers, they know their very, very specific job, and they maybe know a little bit to the right and to the left, but they don't really have a big picture of what's going on. And if they do, it's
I
still.
under, yeah, and I understand what you're saying in that aspect. Yeah, you're kind of right, but again, that's more or less a comparison to a a biological form in general. So, for instance, while my muscles may not know what my heart is doing, they all work in unison. But that's not an example on how evolution works. Evolution is blind chance. Working in a factory is not. In fact, working in a factory, making an iPhone, even experimenting to make a new iPhone or a new phone in general, you have an idea of what you're wanting to do. You start off with that idea, and yes, you do experiment. You do have some failures, but the thing is this isn't a blind chance thing.
You
It
know,
isn't something that you're just
in
going
one,
off of no previous information
listen,
on.
listen.
Well, evolution is.
In one of my projects that I'm an open source contributor. So as soon as I joined, I found a bug in one of the subsystems, and I reported it to the top guy, to the top engineer, who is the top. He knows the whole thing, and he wrote most of it. Like super genius. So I reported to him the bug. and he barely understood it. And he asked me, "Can I solve it?" And I said, "Of course." And I solved it and I submitted it. And he said, "Can I explain it?" And I did. And he still couldn't understand it. He had no idea what the bug was, what the solution was. But he said, I wrote the test to prove that there is a bug before and to prove that the bug is solved after. So he said, okay, obviously you proved that there is a bug, you proved that you solved it, but it's too complicated for me to understand. And this is the overall engineering of a tiny system. It's not even a big system. It's not even a
But
big.
the way you're explaining this is you're making it out as if yeah, when you go over, right? Yes, a single person cannot memorize every single line of code, but there are processes you can use in order to figure out what you're doing,
Anyway,
right?
the
The
point is
problem with what
no
you're
one
stating is
look. The point is no one in the world knows what I did there except for me, and I only know exactly what I changed. I don't know anything else about the huge project. This is a
yeah, because
multi.
you're coming at it with fresh eyes,
No, the point
right? You
is,
have fresh eyes on it,
no,
so you're going to
I
be able to
don't.
point out the
I
problem.
was, I was, and I still am a tiny contributor. I have no idea about the entire system, but this entire
You
system,
don't have to.
but this entire listen.
If I go into a system,
But this entire system is tiny, and this entire system is a tiny Lego piece for other systems. Huge systems use the system that I work
but
on.
okay, so let me explain something to you, right? If if me, like I, in my free time, I'm National Guard, right?
Hmm.
I am one of many MOSs that work on the Blackhawk. You have 15 Bravos, engines,
Hmm.
15 Golfs who work on the sheet metal, right? That's who I work with. And you have 15 Tangos who are the general mechanics, right?
Okay.
Here's the difference, right? Even while we were all doing our jobs, right?
Hmm.
There's not you don't encounter and will never encounter a problem where in which that aircraft just now knows how to walk, right? Like that's not a thing. But in evolution, it can be. Black Hawk isn't just going to one day start growing an extra tail fin, right? It is an artificially made thing. We would have to physically attach it. If we want to attach more wheels to it,
But even
we would have to devise a
but
plan to do it.
but 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 the first fish to crawl out of the ocean didn't know how to fly, but its descendants grew feathers and then grew wings and learned to fly. It's
But the thing is the Black Hawk doesn't have descendants, right? It doesn't have descendants or precedents. They're made. If you look at aircraft, right? Each aircraft has a different purpose entirely, and it's crafted
but you
to
don't
have a
know
different
but
purpose.
you don't know the descendants of the Black Hawk through evolution what they're going to look like. No one knows what the Black Hawk will
If
evolve
I go back in time, I know that the first flying machine was made by the Orville brothers. All right, the first functioning aircraft. All right.
yeah.
I also know, and I can point out that that aircraft did not give birth to another aircraft. Right.
Right.
So
Right.
my point is that you have one that can add things to it
But
by
I mean,
itself without external
no, but
processes.
if you look,
I don't have to go to a pig and
no,
genetically inject it for it to evolve. It can do it itself.
no. But when you think about how a human produces another human, right? If you think a human is like a machine, a human is a very, very complicated machine composed of many tiny molecular robots. So this human machine decides, quote unquote. It doesn't decide because there is just neurons, and these neurons are tiny robots. So all these tiny robots, each of which is not intelligent, each of which has no notion, each of which is completely blind. There's no communication with the universe. Anyway, so this human machine walks up to another human machine and decides that it's what's known as a fertile female, and injects it with a tiny uh, piece of information, of molecular information, a molecular sequence, and that travel anyway. So, but if you look at the human as a machine, then all that is going on is that
Machines cannot reproduce.
no, all that is going on is that a Black Hawk blueprints were sent over to the factory, and the factory took the blueprints and created the next generation of the Black Hawk. So
No,
you can
that's not how any of that works. As someone who worked on a Black Hawk, right? When we want to create a new Black Hawk, we want to create a new aircraft, we come up with a purpose in mind first. We don't just create a new version of the Black Hawk, right? We go, right now our Black Hawks are designed to be basic. They're supposed to be able to lift
but you don't know
basic, smaller aircraft.
you don't
Let me finish.
but you don't know that. You don't know that. You're not an
Yes, I
engineer.
do,
Are
because
you
I do this for a living.
wait, are you
All right,
do
because
you
here's the thing:
do
if
you
we
des-
send this off, and
do you
you're
design
saying that they just
do you design the next
we
generation?
design I have seen the blueprints for the new generations of Blackhawks they're wanting to come out with,
But di-
which are
but
a completely different design
But
than what
did
was
you?
original.
But did you? Are you part of the process? Did you study the process by which a new version is
Actually,
created?
I have,
Okay,
because I was part of the ones we were talking with our general, and I was actually one of the ones who we were suggesting ideas. We were just throwing shit out there, right?
exactly. That
Shit talking on
those
how
are the
things.
mutations.
Let me finish. Stop cutting me off.
Those are the mutations.
So we're no,
Exactly.
it wasn't,
Exactly.
because they're not random.
Yes.
They're not
I'm
random.
not.
Is the point?
Okay. Fine.
No, it is not. I'm not throwing out that the Blackhawks should have more wheels. The Blackhawks should have an extra wing. That's not what I'm doing. I'm saying,
Some of the ideas,
okay,
but how do you know when you have an idea? How do you know how it came about? You have to know.
motherfucker, let me finish my story, right? So I'm explaining to you. This is what we were talking about, right? We were talking about a new model of aircraft, right? Now, as someone who works on a Black Hawk, this is what happens, right? We go through, we say, hey, we want a new specialized aircraft, all right? Keyword here, specialized. We want it to be able to perform certain tasks. This is what we come up beforehand. The Black Hawk can do general lifting. It can transport troops. It's a very overall good for a lot of different things. That's why it's used in many different areas. But now we're wanting a more specialized version. Particularly the one we were throwing out there was for medevac, medical evacuation. We wanted one that would have more systems in place that keep someone alive. So basically, we were throwing ideas out there related to that. Evolution doesn't work like that. Evolution doesn't go, I want to run faster, and then design a gene to run faster. It mutates, and it may or may not help it in some way. We don't just throw ideas out there, throw it on a helicopter, and see if it works. That's not how that works.
I'm not
You come up with
saying.
an overarching plan, and you design from there.
Okay, listen.
Why do you think they're able to come out with a new iPhone every year?
Look, I don't. We don't disagree on the reality. I'm just saying, I I employ Darwinistic evolution basically all the time whenever I analyze the history, the future, any and basically
But there's a
anything.
difference, though. What you're ignoring is the fact that even Darwinistic evolution, Darwin's evolution, all right, he pointed out it was random, that things could work and things couldn't, that there was not an implicit goal in mind.
Yeah, but that's
What you're pointing out, though, is 9 times out of
a
10,
feature.
it does have an implicit view and point in mind.
No. That because I know.
So you think that when we came up with the democratic government, we didn't have the view of we want to create a better government than what Britain has,
So how exactly?
because that's what it was.
So how do governments evolve? So the way I would say governments evolve is, and that's one of the fundamental.
Politicians get up and they say we need to change certain aspects,
No, no,
right? Whether it be the
no,
economy,
no,
they don't just throw
no,
legislation out there and hope it works.
no. Listen. So, and this is one of the ideas of the 50 states, that the 50 states are 50 parallel Darwinistic experiments. That's the beauty. Anyway, so the idea of
What?
natural. natural selection. Listen, listen. The idea is that how do governments evolve? So the first idea of Darwin is that
Not through natural selection.
what?
But not through natural selection. No,
Listen, listen.
they don't evolve through another
I
person eating a politician.
no stuff. I'm not saying that, but listen to the rule set that Darwin told us to use. So he said the first step is that um, animals have way too many offsprings that could survive. You need that. First of all, that's the first rule that you need to have. You have to have.
Nope. In fact, Darwin even pointed out the fact that what causes genetic evolution to happen faster is through bottlenecks, which is where the population increasingly dwindles, which allows the whatever that they're whatever information that's being produced allows it to go about faster around the populated species. That is something he pointed out. So no, you're wrong on that standpoint as well.
Look, look.
That was in his book.
Hold on. Look, the first step, as far as I understand, you need to overproduce the next generation. And this is so that.
No. In fact, Darwin goes directly against that by saying that in order to have a in order to have a adaptation that makes it a genetic or adaptation in general to make it throughout the entire species and help that species evolve, the best way for it to happen is through a bottleneck where the species decreases and there's less amount of people to send that adaptation along. Like that's basic math. Trying to hand out a banana to 5,000 people is going to take much longer and much harder than it is to send it through 5. Like that is in his book.
1 second. If you
So
don't.
no, overpopulation actually decreases the chances of genetic evolution
1 second.
or evolution in general.
1 second. So if the parents don't have many children, let's say the parents have
Again,
small.
even Darwin's evolution didn't happen on the singular level. It happened on a species level.
Listen, if the parents have just a few children so that all of them survive, then how are you going to get evolution? How are you going to do selection?
Because evolution, even Darwin's, worked on this population.
Yeah.
It happens through the population, not on the individual level.
Right, but
So, for instance, when a gene mutation happens, right, when that mutation happens and occurs, it's not going to spread through, it'll be much harder to spread through a big population. A big population is actually more likely to get lost and end up at a dead end.
okay,
But when you have a decreased population, it's much easier. The
Okay.
same way if that parent has 10 kids, right, that 10 kids is much more likely to reproduce
hold on. You're not
with that
no
adaptation.
No. Look, Darwin called it evolution by means of natural selection. The key word is selection. You need to have a natural process of selection, meaning some must die. You cannot have.
Yes, and some can still die in a and do you know what a bottleneck is caused?
No, hold
Like how a bottleneck is caused in a
No,
species? It is caused from a massive amount of them dying.
Hold on. Right. So
A massive amount of this species dies.
you need to overproduce children in order for some of them
No.
to die. What do you mean no? So all
No.
your children are going to survive?
If let's put it into perspective like this, right? It can happen through a myriad of ways. It can be this certain population overpopulated to the point where it was hard to eat, right? Many of them died. Or it could be that a
Well, as soon as you
tsunami
say-
came through and wiped out a
when you say-
population.
When you say many of them died, you're agreeing with me that you need to overproduce.
It can also happen when when the parents, as you're stating, become somehow infertile, or many other ways. But notice how it doesn't have to be just because they die, right? The dying isn't crucial to this. The dying
So how do you
is
have
just
selection? Wait, so how do you have selection? Explain where the word selection.
because natural selection wasn't even Darwin's only means,
What
right?
do you mean? It's called evolution.
That was one of his early. That was one of his earliest. That was one of his earliest works. But if you actually
It's
go
the
through and
name of
read
the
the book, if you read his, I don't give it. Okay, if you read his book, if you actually fucking read it, he states multiple times that the way it works is through population genetics. And when that population dwindles, whether it be by myriad of ways, it causes that gene to spread throughout faster. But it doesn't have to be due to a huge population. It can happen into a underpopulated zone. The key thing he was pointing out was is it's more that mutation is more likely to make it throughout the entire population when the population is smaller, right? The dying doesn't actually play a contributing role. It's yes, in some situations, the weak die. Those with genetic adaptations that hurt them versus help them will die off. That's the natural selection bit. But there were a myriad of other methods that you were just flat out ignoring because you're going only by the title. You're not actually going through and reading his book, right? He points out several different ways that this could happen. Bottlenecks in species, whether it be through natural disasters, whether it be through overpopulation, or whether it just flat out be because this particular group of animal doesn't have a lot of offspring. Those three can all help whatever mutation spread faster. Actually stated in the book. Go give it a read, please.
1 second. I'm reading through. I was listening to you while reading. I'm reading the Wikipedia entry.
So instead of reading the book, you're just going to read the Wikipedia entry, which is more likely than not going to leave things out. Because the Wikipedia entry is actually regular people do it.
Yeah, I'm gonna need to read his original writing. Uh, yeah, whoever wrote this entry, I don't think read the book either.
Yeah, because I have read the book multiple times. In fact, it was part of my classes I was taking. And he literally talks about the bottleneck. So, yeah, it was a very, very common thing.
What was the name? Malthus. Let's see if
Well,
Malthus is mentioned.
he wrote that, and another thing is he wrote several books on the topic, not
No,
just
but here,
one.
listen to this. So Darwin's ideas. Let me copy paste because this is important. Because this, I know this because I studied this very in depth. So Darwin's ideas were inspired by the observations that he had made on the second voyage of the HMS Beagle,
Yes,
1831, and by the work of a political economist, Thomas Robert Malthus, who, in an essay on the principle of population, 1798, noted that population, if unchecked, increases exponentially, whereas the food supply grows only arithmetically. Thus, inevitable limitations of resources would have demographic implications, leading to a quote struggle for existence unquote. When Darwin
yeah, but that is not the only way.
no, fine.
Darwin even
Yes,
produced other ways. If
yes.
that's my point.
Yeah. Let me just finish reading. So when Darwin read Malthus in 1838, he was already primed by his work as a naturalist to appreciate the struggle for existence in nature. It struck him that as population outgrew resources, favorable variations would tend to be preserved and unfavorable ones to be destroyed.
But here's the problem, though,
Well,
is we actually do not see that a lot in the fossil record.
just last sentence. The result of this would be the formation of new species, Darwin wrote. So this is a quote from Darwin, or oh no, the following is a quote.
Yeah, and I'm telling you that he points out a myriad of other ways, right? In fact, he actually goes back and he
Okay,
states,
here's a quote from the book. So, if during the long course of ages and under varying conditions of life, organic beings vary at all in the several parts of their organization, and I think this cannot be disputed, if there be, owing to the high geometrical powers of increase of each species, at some age, season, or year, a severe struggle for life, this certainly cannot be disputed. So he says once in a while, this he took from Malthus, that once in a while there's this clash between the size of the population and the resources. This is basically
Yeah, but my
Malthus.
point is
Wait, let me.
and notice how I even pointed out that that can
I
happen,
agree.
but
I
the
agree.
point is
I
that's
agree.
not what we
Oh, okay,
see
okay, okay,
happen the majority of the time.
okay. I'm with you. I'm with you because it seems like Darwin didn't appreciate Darwin didn't really get it. So let me just continue. So then, considering the infinite complexity of the relations of all organic beings to each other and to their conditions of existence, causing an infinite diversity in structure, constitution, and habits to be advantageous to them, I think it would be a most extraordinary fact if no variation ever had occurred useful to each being's own welfare in the same way as so many variations have occurred useful to man. But if variations useful to any organic being do occur, assuredly individuals thus characterized will have the best chance of being preserved in the struggle for life, and from the strong principle of inheritance they will tend to produce offspring similarly characterized. This principle, they speak like Yoda. This principle of preservation I have called, for the sake of brevity, natural selection. Anyway, yeah, you're right. He didn't understand that every animal in nature has a lot of children. That there's always
But that okay,
overabundance.
so
Go ahead.
can I point out something?
Hmm.
The majority of extinction events do not happen due to overpopulation. In fact, they're either natural disasters. They are, yes, it is due to them finding harder to get resources, but it has nothing to do with just them overpopulating. Yes, they have a lot of kids, but the point I was making was is that that's not that's not what causes that to go
No, no,
about.
no. I
It's
agree.
not
This is
them
very.
having a bunch of kids that causes it.
It doesn't matter. I mean, this.
Yes,
Yeah.
it does.
No, no, no. I understand. No, no. I'm saying that Darwin didn't appreciate that every generation there's always an overpopulation built in. There's always an abundance of children. I mean, you can see a cat. A cat had Wonder Wandenreich. Did you say something? No. So look at every cat. Every cat has so many, such a big litter. They're not all going to survive, and all the cats are always impregnated by the male cat in the area. Anyway, they have so many children, but the population size doesn't change. So you have demographic pressure, and Darwin was not aware of this. So that's really interesting.
Actually, he was. So if you read his book, actually read it instead of just wanting to quote mine,
Hmm.
right? There were several points in his book where he talked about that, where he talked about the fact. But the thing is it's not overpopulation that causes it. It is actually when the population dwindles, right? When it bottlenecks. So that's where we see the majority of
No,
evolutionary evolution.
no. I'm talking about
We can prove it though. We can
no. But
prove that when a
I'm talking
think of it like this, right? If imagine I'm trying to give off a genetic, let's say, an adaptation, right? Let's imagine that adaptation as a banana that I am passing around, right? It is going to be much easier to spread that throughout a colony of 500 than it is 5 million. That is actually why we don't see many adaptations happening within humans
Let
today.
me let me
But
ask
the
you
thing
this.
is in dwindling populations throughout history,
Let me
throughout evolutionary, the fossil record, it is because of dwindling populations.
Let me ask you this. When you see the giraffe with its long neck, so how do you think that that came about?
Well, I can pull up the entire evolutionary chain, wherein which either there are a multitude of different ways, depending on how far back you want to go out, because it wasn't just one day one animal woke up with a big ass neck, right?
Right, but it happened
So
over multiple generations, where each generation, the probably the
had
tree,
a small change,
the probably the tree.
a small, almost unnoticeable change.
Right, but what was pushing the neck to grow longer? It was probably the tree.
Nothing.
No,
No, that is Lamarckianism.
no, it was
Lamarckianism evolution is that them stretching their necks to get to leave
no,
causes kids to have
no.
longer necks.
It was
We can
probably
show that to be wrong.
okay. It was probably the tree. Something, right? So something in the environment changed slowly, and that pushed the neck to stretch slowly.
Hold
I,
on, we're about to pull up the entire fossil record of the giraffe.
anyway, I gotta go. My time limit. I have my time limit. Anyway, let me send you. Did I send you a friend request? I think I sent
Hmm.
you a friend request. Do me a favor. So let's be in touch, and maybe we can debate more stuff later.
Yeah.
I gotta go.
Peace.
Oh, he's gone. All right. All right. I'm going. He didn't. He didn't like my idea that you can employ Darwin's evolution by means of natural selection. He didn't see that it's so powerful that you can use it to understand so many phenomenon in nature. So many natural phenomenon can be explained with Darwin's evolution. He couldn't get it. Very sad. Okay, I'll finish here. Bye. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share, comment. Bye.